I want to tell you about a man who hated God, not the casual, polite kind of disbelief where a person shrugs at the question of religion and goes back to their coffee. I mean a man who was furious at the very concept, who had buried his daughter at 7 years old, who had watched the skies stay silent and the earth stay cold, and who had decided, with the clean finality of a slammed door, that if there was a God, he wanted nothing to do with him. His name doesn't matter. What matters is what happened to him one Tuesday morning in March. He was driving to work. The radio was off. He was thinking about nothing in particular, invoices maybe, or the argument he'd had the night before. And then he came around a bend in the road, and the sun was rising over a field of frost, and every single blade of grass was lit up like a filament, like a wire carrying current, trembling in that thin early light, and the whole field was breathing, silver and gold, and impossibly alive. He pulled over. He didn't know why. He sat there for 11 minutes. He didn't pray. He didn't weep. He didn't think anything theological at all. But he told me, years later, that something cracked open in him in those 11 minutes. Something that had been sealed shut since the funeral. And he said, and these were his exact words, "I didn't find an argument. I found a door." That is what we are here to talk about today. Now let me ask you something. When was the last time something in the natural world stopped you? Not impressed you, not amused you, stopped you. The way a hand on your chest stops you. The way a voice you recognize across a crowded room stops you. We live in an era of relentless exposure to the beautiful. We carry in our pockets a device that can show us in seconds the bioluminescent bays of Puerto Rico, the aurora borealis burning green over Iceland, the migration of 10 million monarch butterflies through a Mexican forest. We have seen the photographs from the James Webb Space Telescope, galaxies so ancient and so distant that the light reaching our eyes left before the Earth existed. We have seen all of this, and yet how often are we stopped? There is a difference between consuming beauty and being encountered by it, a difference between seeing and being seen. Most of us, I think, have had at least one moment, perhaps only one, perhaps many, when something in the created world looked back at us, when the beauty wasn't just out there, decorative and passive, but pressing toward us, urgent, almost speaking. Scientists have a name for a version of this experience. They call it the overview effect, the cognitive shift reported by nearly every astronaut who has looked back at Earth from space. Edgar Mitchell, the Apollo 14 astronaut, described it as a sudden, overwhelming sense that the universe was in some way conscious, that matter and energy and meaning were not three separate things but one. He said it came on him in an instant, without warning, without effort, while he was simply looking at a field of stars. He had not gone to space religious. He came back unable to stop asking questions. What is it about beauty that does this? Why does a sunset produce something more than aesthetic pleasure? Why does the ocean at its widest make some people feel simultaneously very small and very held? Why does the first cry of a newborn in a delivery room make unbelievers touch their mouths and look at the ceiling? Why does beauty reach? Let me offer you a way of thinking about this. The ancient theologians, and here I don't mean dusty men in robes, I mean thinkers who were also scientists, also poets, also deeply serious about the nature of reality, they had a concept called vestigia Dei, the footprints of God. The idea that creation does not merely exist but points, that beauty is not an accident of chemistry but a kind of language, that when you stand at the edge of the Grand Canyon and your chest floods with something you can't name, you are not having a neurological glitch. You are reading a word written in stone 2 billion years in the making. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You are thinking, this is a lovely metaphor, but isn't it just brain chemistry? Isn't the sense of awe just dopamine and evolutionary adaptation, a survival mechanism that made our ancestors pay close attention to their environment? And I want to say yes. And also, is that all? Think about it this way. When you fall in love, your brain produces oxytocin, your heart rate changes, your pupils dilate. Every single thing that happens when you love another person has a chemical correlate, a measurable biological process. Does that mean love is only chemistry? Does that mean when your mother held your face in her hands and told you she loved you, nothing real was happening, only a cascade of molecules? Of course not. We know, even without being able to prove it with instruments, that the love was real, that it meant something beyond the molecules, that the chemistry was the mechanism, not the meaning. I would suggest to you that the same logic applies to the experience of beauty in creation. When you stand in a forest of redwoods, trees that have been alive for 2,000 years, trees that were saplings when the Roman Empire was at its height, and you feel that strange, particular awe, that sensation of being in the presence of something that does not need you, that existed long before you and will exist long after. That feeling is not just neurons firing. It is contact with something that endures, something with the texture of the eternal. Or consider this, the mathematical structure of the universe. The physicist Paul Dirac once said that the universe seems to be written in beautiful mathematics, and that beauty reliably is a signal of truth. Einstein's equations are not just correct, they are elegant. The golden ratio appears in nautilus shells and sunflower seeds and the spiral arms of galaxies, not because God is an aesthete playing tricks, but because beauty and order and truth are somehow the same thing, braided together at the root of reality. The theologian and scientist Alistair McGrath puts it this way: the natural world seems to be calibrated to produce wonder. It is not simply that beautiful things exist, it is that we are built to receive them, that we have the precise emotional and cognitive equipment to be moved by a sunset, that we have the categories for meaning that a thunderstorm or a field of frost can fill. The signal and the receiver were made for each other. You don't build a receiver unless you have a signal to receive. And here is where beauty becomes not merely pleasant, but evidence, not proof in the legal sense, no courtroom argument, no syllogism, but evidence in the scientific sense, data that must be accounted for, the universality of the experience of transcendent beauty, the fact that every human civilization, in every era, in every geography, has looked at the world and felt that it means something, has looked at the world and worshipped, has carved the faces of gods in stone and painted the ceilings of caves by firelight, and turned toward the mountains and asked, "Is anyone there?" That question is not an error in our programming. It is, I believe, the most accurate thing about us. Consider the strange mathematics of the cosmos itself. The physical constants, the gravitational constant, the cosmological constant, the ratio of the mass of the electron to the proton, are calibrated with such precision that if any of them were altered by even the smallest fraction, no stars would form, no planets would cohere, no carbon would exist, no life would breathe. Physicists call this fine-tuning. Some say it is luck. Some say there are infinite universes and we simply happen to be in the one that worked. But many, including some who came to this conclusion reluctantly, fighting it, look at the fine-tuning of the cosmos and see not luck but intention, not accident but artistry. Freeman Dyson, one of the great physicists of the 20th century and not a conventional believer, wrote, "The more I examine the universe and the details of its architecture, the more evidence I find that the universe in some sense knew we were coming. The universe knew we were coming." That is not the language of a machine. That is the language of a welcome. But here is where I want to slow down. Here is where I want to tell you the thing that most speeches about the beauty of creation leave out. Finding God through beauty is not comfortable. We romanticize it. We imagine it as a gentle, golden experience. Soft light through cathedral windows, bird song at dawn, a quiet sense of peace settling like snow. And sometimes it is that. But if you take the experience of transcendent beauty seriously, if you really let it land, it is not only peaceful, it is demanding. Because if the beauty of creation is a language, then it is asking something of you. It is not a painting you can hang on the wall and walk past. It is a letter you have to open. And the question the letter asks is not comfortable. If all this was made, what does the maker want from you? If you are known the way that field of frost made that grieving man feel known, then you are accountable to something beyond yourself. The beauty of creation does not let you stay where you are. The writer C.S. Lewis described his own conversion not as a warm bath of peace, but as a surrender, reluctant, fighting. The most unwilling convert in all of England, he said. He had followed the beauty of myth and music and literature all his life, feeling in them what he called joy, a longing so sweet it was almost painful. And one night he had to admit that what he was longing toward was not an idea or an aesthetic feeling, but a person. And that was terrifying, because a person can make claims on you. A feeling cannot. That is the twist in the story of beauty. We want the sunset without the obligation. We want the sense of the sacred without the sacred making any demands. We want the door without anyone waiting on the other side of it. But the evidence of creation, its beauty, its order, its fine-tuning, its strange capacity to make us feel home in it even as it dwarfs us, that evidence points not to an indifferent mechanism, but to a purposeful presence, a presence that is not satisfied with being admired from a distance, a presence that came close, that, in the Christian understanding, did not stay behind the beauty of the world, but entered it, became flesh, walked on the same ground we walk on, looked at the same stars, felt the same wind. The creation is not the destination, it is the arrow. Every flower, every galaxy, every frost-lit blade of grass, they are all arrows. Arrows pointing not at themselves, but through themselves, toward the one who made them and filled them with this insistent, excessive, unnecessary beauty. Why is a sunset more beautiful than it needs to be for survival? Why does music make us weep for things we cannot name? Why does the ocean feel like something we once knew? Because we were made by beauty, for beauty, and the beauty of this world is the closest thing to a signature that the infinite can press onto the finite. It is God writing his name in a language we cannot help but feel, even when we cannot yet say what it means. That man who pulled over on a March morning, he eventually found his way back, not to the religion of his childhood exactly, but to something realer and harder and more his own. It took years. The door he found in the frost was only the beginning of a long walk. But he told me something I have never forgotten, he said. I used to think that if God existed, he would have to be obvious, unmissable, undeniable. And the fact that he wasn't obvious made me angry. But then I realized, the most important things are never obvious. Love isn't obvious. Meaning isn't obvious. Beauty isn't obvious. You have to stop. You have to look. You have to let yourself be found. You have to let yourself be found. That is the invitation written into every beautiful thing in this world. The mountain doesn't shout. The galaxy doesn't demand your attention. The frost doesn't command you to pull over. But the beauty is there, patient, insistent, waiting. And if you let yourself be stopped, really stopped, not impressed but encountered, you may find, as that man found, as millions before you have found, that the beauty was never just beauty. It was a door. And on the other side of every door, there is always someone who put it there. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth. Their words to the ends of the world. Psalm 19, 1-4.